The soft hum of classical music floated through the air of the opulent lobby at the Grand Sterling, a luxurious hotel in the heart of Manhattan. Manager, that old man walking toward us, he's not coming here, is he? The young receptionist stole a glance at the elderly man approaching the hotel entrance, a slight crease forming on his forehead. The manager, Daniel Grayson, followed the receptionist's gaze and let out a quiet sigh. "He is coming this way," Daniel muttered under his breath, adjusting his silk tie. "Ugh, seriously? What's this about?" the receptionist grumbled, quickly composing himself. As the old man reached the front desk, the receptionist straightened up and put on a professional but noticeably cold smile. "Sir, I'm terribly sorry, but we're currently fully booked." The elderly man paused, tilting his head slightly. His silver hair was neatly combed back, and though his clothes were simple, slacks, a weathered leather jacket, and scuffed shoes, he carried himself with a quiet dignity. "Oh, I see," he replied, his voice calm, almost understanding. But before he could turn away, he noticed something interesting. Just a few feet away, another guest, a sharply dressed businessman with a sleek, designer briefcase, was being welcomed warmly. "Welcome, sir. Let me check you in right away. Would you like assistance with your bags?" The elderly man let out a soft chuckle, then turned back to the receptionist. "I understand. But may I use the restroom? It's a bit urgent." The receptionist stiffened, his polite mask slipping for just a moment. "I'm afraid the restrooms are for hotel guests only." At that moment, it felt as if the classical music playing in the lobby had come to a stop. The receptionist's discomfort was obvious, and he cast a desperate glance at the VIP manager, hoping for guidance. But no intervention came. The elderly man nodded, offering a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Ah, I see. Well, that's unfortunate." And with that, he turned on his heel and walked out. The elderly man's name was Henry Lancaster, 65 years old. He was a retired entrepreneur who now lived in a quiet countryside town where he ran a small community center for seniors and underprivileged children. Every morning, he tended to his vegetable garden, chatted with the elderly members of his town, and shared cookies with the school children on their way home. But today, he had come to Manhattan for an important meeting with an old friend. As he walked through the bustling city streets, he was hit with a wave of nostalgia. It had been years since he had last set foot in Manhattan, and even longer since he had been anywhere near the Grand Sterling Hotel. The memory of the hotel's early days flickered in his mind. Back then, it had been a place of warmth, of hospitality, a place where all guests, felt welcome. But as he had just witnessed, things had changed. The cold stares, the subtle yet undeniable discrimination. Henry sighed as he sat on a park bench near the hotel, his fingers tightening around the business card in his pocket. He wasn't angry. No, anger was fleeting. What he felt was something deeper, an unshakable disappointment. But before he could leave, hurried footsteps approached him. "Sir, please wait." Henry turned to see a young woman, slightly out of breath, dressed in the hotel's signature uniform. Her name tag read, Emma Carter. I'm so sorry. I saw what happened earlier and I couldn't say anything." Her voice wavered with guilt. Henry tilted his head, studying her. She was young, maybe in her early 20s, and her brown eyes shimmered with sincerity. "I should have spoken up," she continued, wringing her hands together. "But I'm just a new hire, and I was afraid of saying the wrong thing. But what happened wasn't right." Henry smiled. "It's all right, young lady. I was once young, too. Made my share of mistakes."
"No, sir."
This wasn't a mistake. It was wrong. Her conviction surprised him. Emma hesitated for a moment, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small notepad, scribbling something down quickly before tearing the page off and handing it to him. "This is my number. If you ever need anything, please let me know. And I hope you'll come back. I promise I'll personally welcome you next time." Henry took the note, his fingers brushing against the paper. Hope. It was still there after all. "Thank you, Emma," he said softly. "But are you sure it's all right for you to be out here? Won't your manager be upset?" Emma glanced back at the hotel, then shook her head. "I told them I was taking my lunch break." She smiled, genuine, warm, untainted by the arrogance he had seen earlier. Henry chuckled. "Well, you're a good one, Emma. You remind me of the kind of people this hotel used to have." She blinked. "Wait, what do you mean?" He glanced at the business card in his hand but decided to say nothing. Not yet. Instead, he stood, dusting off his pants. "Let's just say, I've known this hotel for a long time." And with that, he walked away, leaving behind a young woman who had no idea she had just spoken to the man who built the Grand Sterling Hotel. A week had passed. During that time, Henry returned to the Grand Sterling Hotel every day, but each time, he dressed differently. Some days, he wore old, worn-out sneakers and a simple sweatshirt. Other times, he put on a modest but neatly pressed suit. He didn't approach the front desk again. Instead, he sat quietly in a corner of the lobby, watching. "Hey, isn't it the same old man from yesterday?" "She'll lower your voice." "Yeah, I've seen him here every day this week." "I think he's suspicious. Should we report him to security?" The hushed whispers of the hotel staff drifted through the air. Henry, pretending to read a newspaper, remained still. Yet, he could feel their eyes on him. The sharp gaze of the VIP manager, MS. Evelyn Harper, who stood behind the front desk, her arms crossed. "Emma," Evelyn called, her voice smooth yet firm. "Yes, Miss Harper? Don't bother with that man. He doesn't fit our hotel's image. If he feels unwelcome, he'll leave on his own." Emma's lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something. But she hesitated. A brief flicker of resistance passed through her expression, though she ultimately lowered her head. "Understood," she murmured. Henry sighed inwardly. He had observed enough. The hotel was split into two kinds of people. There were those like Evelyn Harper and the arrogant receptionist who viewed people solely by their appearance and status. And then there were people like Emma, those who still believed in genuine hospitality, even if they felt powerless against the hotel's rigid standards. He thought back to what this place used to be. Decades ago, he had built this hotel from the ground up. It had started as a dream, one meant to create a space where weary travelers, regardless of their background, could find comfort and warmth.
But now?
Now, it had become a fortress of exclusivity, a place where wealth dictated how one was treated. Henry clenched his jaw. This wasn't what he had intended. It was time to remind them. The next morning, Henry did something different. For the first time in years, he put on an elegant, tailored suit, the same one he had worn when he first opened this hotel 20 years ago. He polished his shoes until they gleamed and straightened his tie in the mirror. Then, he walked into the Grand Sterling Hotel, not as an old man from the countryside, not as a quiet observer, but as Henry Lancaster, the original founder and chairman of the Grand Sterling. "Good morning, sir." The very same receptionist who had dismissed him before suddenly stood up straighter, his tone respectful, his expression eager to please. Henry let out a quiet chuckle. How quickly their attitudes changed. "Good morning," Henry replied smoothly. "I'd like to speak with the general manager." The receptionist hesitated. Well, I'm not sure if..." "It's all right. I'll go to him myself." With steady, unhurried steps, Henry walked through the hotel's grand hallway, his presence exuding authority. Sir, wait. You can't just. Too late. Henry pushed open the general manager's office door. Inside, Evelyn Harper, the VIP manager, immediately paled. Excuse me, this is a private. But before she could finish, a voice rang from the other side of the room. 8 a.m., sharp as always. A man in a tailored navy suit stepped forward, Patrick Whitmore, the general manager of the Grand Sterling. His expression turned ghostly white. H. Henry Lancaster? A heavy silence fell over the room. Evelyn's face drained of all color. The receptionist, who had rushed in behind Henry, nearly tripped over his own feet. For the first time, real fear flickered in their eyes. Henry clasped his hands behind his back and spoke calmly but firmly. You've done well maintaining the luxury of this place, Patrick. A pause. But I see that you've forgotten what true hospitality means. The air in the room shifted. Henry's words were not a simple observation. They were a verdict. And everyone knew what that meant. Within an hour, every staff member had been gathered in the grand conference hall. Hundreds of employees sat in tense silence, unsure of what was happening. Patrick Whitmore stood at the front, sweating slightly, while Evelyn and the other senior staff members sat stiffly beside him. Henry walked onto the stage. His voice was calm, unwavering. 20 years ago, when I built this hotel, I had one goal: to create a place where every guest could find comfort. Not just the wealthy, not just the privileged, but anyone in need of rest. He let the words sink in, but somewhere along the way, that dream was lost. His gaze swept over the crowd, resting briefly on Emma, who looked stunned, her hands gripping the edges of her seat. For the past week, I have walked through these halls unnoticed, observing how this hotel now treats its guests. And what I saw, his eyes darkened. It was disappointing. The room stilled. Patrick swallowed hard. Evelyn flinched. Henry took a deep breath and delivered the final blow. Starting today, the Grand Sterling will change. No longer will it be a hotel that serves only the elite. This place will once again be a home to everyone, from the elderly to families, from children to travelers of all walks of life. A murmur rippled through the audience. Evelyn abruptly stood. But, sir, if we allow that, our luxury image. Henry raised a hand, silencing her instantly. You still don't understand, do you? His voice softened, yet held immeasurable weight. True luxury is not about exclusion. It is about warmth. It is about service. And it is about people. Evelyn sat back down, defeated. Patrick Whitmore sighed, running a hand over his face. Then, slowly but surely, applause began to rise from the employees. First one, then another. And soon, the entire hall erupted into thunderous applause. Even Patrick, the general manager, reluctantly joined in, though he had just realized his days in this position were likely numbered. Henry smiled, because this was just the beginning. A month had passed. The Grand Sterling Hotel was no longer the same. The once exclusive lobby had undergone a subtle, yet significant transformation. A cozy lounge had been added near the entrance, a space designed for elderly guests to sit, relax, and enjoy a quiet moment. The second floor now housed a dedicated children's play area and a nursing room, allowing families to feel at ease during their stay. And the hotel's renowned restaurant? It had introduced a special menu tailored for both seniors and children, ensuring that everyone, regardless of age or dietary needs, felt included. Sir, today marks the launch of our first intergenerational storytelling program. Emma beamed as she approached Henry in the main hall. She had changed, too. No longer just a front desk staff member, she had been promoted to the head of guest experience, leading initiatives that focused on genuine hospitality. The program where seniors share old stories with the children?
Henry mused, smiling. Yes.
We already have a dozen seniors and over 15 kids signed up. As they walked toward the newly renovated second-floor lounge, Henry suddenly spotted a familiar face. A woman stood near the hallway, her eyes uncertain yet determined. Evelyn Harper. She had just returned from her one-month assignment at the community center in the countryside. She took a step forward, hesitating before speaking. It wasn't easy, she admitted, her voice softer than usual. Every morning, I worked in the garden, listened to the elderly talk about their lives, played with the children after school. She let out a shaky breath, and for the first time, I realized how much I had been trapped in my own mindset. Henry studied her for a moment before nodding. Good, he said simply. Her lips pressed together as if she wanted to say more, but instead, she just bowed her head. I'd like to do better, she finally said. I want to help lead this change. Emma's eyes widened slightly in surprise, but Henry only smiled. Then start by listening, he said. The guests will tell you what true hospitality means, if you're willing to hear them. That evening, something remarkable happened. The lounge was filled with the gentle hum of conversation. Elderly guests sat comfortably in plush chairs, with children gathered around them, listening intently. Back when I was your age, one elderly gentleman began, we didn't have smartphones. We played outside until the sun set. The children giggled. Another grandmother leaned forward, adjusting her glasses. But we had something even better, stories. And so, the night unfolded with tales from the past, laughter, and newfound connections. Henry stood by the doorway, watching with a quiet sense of fulfillment. Emma, beside him, sighed happily. This, she murmured, is exactly what I dreamed a hotel should be. Henry chuckled. It's not just a hotel anymore, he said. It's a home. 6 months had passed. What had started as an experiment had turned into a revolution. The Grand Sterling's guest experience ratings skyrocketed, and the hotel became internationally recognized for its unique hospitality model. Chairman, CNN has reached out for an exclusive interview. Emma informed Henry one morning. They're calling us the first intergenerational luxury hotel, saying we've redefined what it means to be a 5-star establishment. Henry raised an eyebrow, a small smile tugging at his lips. Did they now? He wasn't in this for the headlines. But he had to admit, it felt good to see the world taking notice. Just then, Evelyn walked over with a new guest reservation list. Sir, you might want to take a look at this. Henry scanned the names, and then paused. One name stood out. A middle-aged businessman had made a special booking for his elderly parents and young children. When the family arrived, Henry greeted them personally. Sir, the man said, his voice thick with gratitude, I never thought I'd find a hotel where my parents and my kids could both feel truly welcome. His elderly mother, seated in a wheelchair, smiled warmly. This place, she whispered, feels like a dream come true. Henry placed a gentle hand over hers. Welcome home, he said. Behind him, Emma wiped away a tear. Even Evelyn, once the hotel's coldest employee, smiled softly. That night, Henry walked to the rooftop garden, his favorite spot. The city lights sparkled below, but his gaze was on something else. The hotel that had once lost its way had found its heart again. Emma joined him, offering him a cup of tea. Sir, she said, I think we did it. Henry exhaled, a deep sense of peace settling over him. Not yet, he said, smiling. But we're just getting started. And as he looked out over the city, he knew. This was the hotel he had always dreamed of. And it was only the beginning.